CBS News. Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan Sunday on CBS.
Tonight, the heat dome is about to expand. Which parts of the country could break records? Then, an Alabama woman reported missing is home safely, but questions remain about her disappearance. Plus, the secrets to still finding great summer travel deals on the CBS Evening News.
The sanctimonious and his establishment handlers are wasting such precious time and resources.
She's one of the top public servants in America. You know, I thought the attacks on her were totally out of hand and totally unnecessary.
It's absolutely imperative that we continue to provide the Ukrainian military what they need to fight and repel the Russian invasion.
I think that Iowa is a place that an outsider can excel.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We're learning more about how much money each presidential campaign is raising in the 2024 race and who is lagging behind in fundraising. President Biden's campaign says he raised $72 million with his joint fundraising committee and the DNC. Former President Trump's campaign and his PAC took in over $35 million from April to June. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he brought in the second most in the GOP field with just over $20 million in the 6 weeks since launching his campaign in late May. For more on all this, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Finn Gomez join us now. Caitlin is a CBS News political correspondent. Finn is a CBS News political director. And Ed O'Keefe is also joining us from the campaign trail. Ed, we're glad we got that connection up. We'll begin with you, Ed, in case it goes out again. Ed, what's your read on DeSantis and how he's trying to come back in South Carolina?
Well, it's not even so much come back at this point, Bob. It's introduce himself. This is one of his first events here in northern South Carolina. We're essentially in greater Charlotte, here in Tegakay, South Carolina. Talked to a lot of people here who are saying things to us about why they want to see him for the first time, the way Iowa voters may have been saying it 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, when he was sort of just getting started in that state. He's going to be the first Republican contender to officially file for the South Carolina primary tomorrow and make another stop or two down there, talk about military policy and some other ideas he has on national security as he continues to lay out a campaign that he argues is nowhere near done and that will have the resources to compete through the early contests next year. Guy we talked to in line who was waiting for a little while to get in here said, look, this is way too early, and I think the guy has proper perspective. It is early, plenty of time to go. It's a race between Trump and DeSantis in the view of this one supporter and in the view of the DeSantis operation, and the rest of them are just applying for cabinet positions. So whether or not that remains the case, we'll see. The issue in the fundraising, as I know you'll discuss with Finn and Caitlin too, is not so much what he raised, but how he's spending what he raised, and whether what we call his burn rate, or the amount he has spent so far, is too much at a time when he may not be able to bring in those kind of smaller dollar donations that campaigns need to fuel them, the $35 donations or the $5 you might get from somebody who saw something on the news or on Facebook. If you can't grow that base, it becomes harder to continue funding these operations in the long haul when all your wealthy friends have maxed out and can't give you any more. So that's a challenge he faces. It's part of why he had to lay off about 10 people over the weekend who are expected to get picked up by the super PAC. And we'll see how he does here in South Carolina in the coming days.
Because Governor DeSantis has been struggling, other candidates in the Republican race have seen an opening. One of them is Vivek Ramaswamy, a businessman, entrepreneur. Caitlin Huey-Burns spoke with him in recent days. Let's take a listen.
Do you think that Iowa is a place that will produce the alternative to Donald Trump?
I don't think about it as Trump or another candidate. I think about the country, right? And so I think that Iowa is a place that an outsider can excel. Because people in this state have a very open mind. If this election were held in all 50 states at the same time, no chance a guy like me could win. And no chance a guy like...
So much of Ramaswamy's path is not necessarily through Trump, but through the path DeSantis was supposed to have for himself. But his struggle has given a lot of confidence, it seems, to him and others.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Ramaswamy told us that he hopes to place in the top 3 in Iowa, top 2 in New Hampshire. That's kind of what he sees as his path. But he's right. I mean, New Hampshire or Iowa is a place where you can be an outsider. And if you just work the ground and introduce yourself to as many voters as possible, you can make some kind of difference there. It was really interesting talking to voters, not only at this big evangelical gathering, but also at a Ron DeSantis event. Ramaswamy's name came up over and over and over again among voters, just saying that they were interested in what he had to say. And I did get the impression after spending a few days reporting there that this is an open field in the minds of Iowa potential caucus goers. They still are very supportive of the former president in terms of his policies, but many of them I talked to said that they want to turn the page and look for someone new. And DeSantis is someone that they're interested in. Nikki Haley also is campaigning there. Tim Scott has also been making impressions there. But notably, I did not hear Mike Pence's name brought up once. In fact, talking to the evangelical voters at that big summit over the weekend, many of them pointed out to me that they were actually not interested in a Pence candidacy because of all the attacks that Trump has waged against him. And we're seeing that in his fundraising totals as well.
And so much of former Vice President Pence's campaign strategy is tethered to Iowa, trying to make inroads there. But it's not been an easy road for Pence. Let's take a listen to some of the response he got from the audience there in recent days.
And I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Well, that answer did not get a positive response from some in the crowd who don't share Pence's view on Ukraine. Could Pence's position on this key foreign policy issue cause him problems in Iowa, Finn?
Yes. In a word, yes. We saw it. I think this was a very bad weekend for Mike Pence. As Caitlin reported, not only were his numbers very bad, frankly, they were low, but you also saw him get eviscerated essentially by Tucker Carlson at that event. You know, there's been a somewhat of a downward trajectory following that in the aftermath of that. I know he's going to New Hampshire tomorrow. He's going to be there for the rest of the week. But for some, and I've spoken to some today, some people close to Pence who say that essentially that the writing could be on the wall. I mean, can he get to the debate stage? It does not seem that he has a clear, and in fact, he has a pretty arduous path to get there by these numbers and by this pace. And again, he basically hit a wall, essentially, with that question from Tucker Carlson. I think it would be very hard for him to pick up momentum. We got a long way. We're not in the prediction business, as you say all the time, Bob, but it does not look great for Mike Pence at this point.
Another issue in Iowa are the comments made by former President Donald Trump about the incumbent governor, Kim Reynolds, who's quite popular with Republicans there. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis spoke about this over the past week.
Governor, you spent a lot of time with Governor Reynolds. You defended her after President Trump's recent statements. Would you consider her as a potential vice presidential pick in this campaign?
Of course. I mean, she's one of the top public servants in America. You know, I thought the attacks on her were totally out of hand and totally unnecessary.
Ed, I know you are in South Carolina, but weigh in with your reporting on Iowa and DeSantis.
Look, he has a good relationship with the governor. She obviously has the potential to be a kingmaker, but traditionally the governor, if it's of the same party holding the caucus, doesn't weigh in advance, doesn't put their thumb on the scale. And so far, at least, it doesn't look like she's going to do that. But various news outlets have picked up on the fact that she has spent a lot of time alongside him, alongside his wife, who launched a Women for DeSantis organization there in Iowa. And they have both complimented each other in the policies that they've implemented over the last several years. Remember, she's head of the Republican Governors Association, so she's right now preternaturally inclined to support one of her fellow state executives. Right now, the one in best shape would be DeSantis, but again, not expected to weigh in. And to see the former president attacking a popular statewide figure like Governor Reynolds, it was an easy opening for everybody else to sort of say, well, I'm a fan of hers, I'll defend her. And in the case of Governor DeSantis responding to our Musaddiq Badar, saying, yeah, I would consider her for vice presidential material. But, you know, another subplot in the ongoing attempt by all these guys to differentiate themselves, and certainly when possible, put some distance between them and the former president.
Finn, quickly.
Yeah, DeSantis still, though, is behind Trump. Trump is still dominant in that state, as Caitlin has reported. He's up by like 24 points on the latest Real Clear Politics average. I mean, he is still the dominant figure right now, Bob.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, Finn Gomez, and Ed O'Keefe, we really appreciate your analysis and your reporting. Speaking of Q2 numbers, one congressman in Maryland is spending a lot of his own money on his own Senate bid. Democrat David Trone joins us next to discuss his campaign. You're streaming America Decides.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery lamps.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether.
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. Some second quarter U.S. Senate campaign finances numbers are out. In Maryland, Democratic Congressman David Trone, he's already spent almost $5 million on his bid to win the 2024 Democratic primary. The billionaire has lent his campaign almost $10 million since April and still has over $5 million in his account. Meanwhile, Prince George's County Executive Angela Brooks, who's also running for the Democratic nomination, raised $1.7 million in the second quarter. Joining us now is Maryland Democratic Congressman David Trone. Congressman, thanks for being here, running for the United States Senate. Now with Congressman Jamie Raskin deciding not to run, how clear is your path to the nomination in your view?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. We've got to get out, travel from Oakland to Ocean City. We're literally in Baltimore County 2-3 times a week and focus on the center part of the state. And we've got to talk to the voters what they want to hear about. What they want to hear about is where you came from, what you've accomplished in business, what you've accomplished in the House, and why you're the right person.
Do you expect this to be an ideological fist fight in the Democratic primary?
No, I'm a very progressive Democrat, but at the same time, I'm also ranked the 10th most bipartisan Democrat on getting stuff done. And that's part of the reason why the last 117th Congress, we actually got 26 bills over the finish line to the president on mental health and addiction. And those are the two biggest focuses that we have, along with systemic racism in this country. So those are the three things we're really laser focused on.
What's your progressive bona fides here in this race? If a voter doesn't know you that well and they say, Congressman Trone, I'm a progressive Democrat in Maryland, how do I know you're one of us? What would you say? Yeah,
you think back, Pell Grants. Everyone knows what Pell Grants are. They were taken away from those that were incarcerated. My first term back, I changed that law. It was my bill on Pell Grants, and now Pell Grants became legal back in the 116th Congress. And we've done the same type of efforts through reforming the Bureau of Prisons, figure out how we can turn those recidivism rates from 75%, which they are if you don't get a job, to 8% if we can get folks a job. So those are the type of things that we're driving, expunging records, whatnot.
So you've amassed some wealth in your life. You've done well. Some progressives might be skeptical of someone who has some experience in the business world, who has amassed capital. Some Democrats would also welcome it because you can self-fund much of your campaign. How are you balancing all of those dynamics? Yeah,
you've really got to think about you used to become wealthy overnight. I mean, we struggled. I was 28, and when our farm went bankrupt, and I thought I'd be in the agribusiness all my life, and I lost my home, I lost my job, we lost everything, and we had to start over again, and I started over at the Wharton School of Business and began to build a company slowly. Eventually, Total Wine & More now is in 28 states. I've got 12,000 team members. But we've done it the right way. We banned the box 20 years ago. We brought in partner benefits 20 years ago. We've hired 1,400 returning citizens. And at the same time, then in Congress, we show we get stuff done too, getting those bills over the finish line and being the leader in the House of Representatives on addiction, the leader on mental health, and the leader on the criminal justice system that is systemically racist.
When you look at Maryland, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I started covering politics, most people would say the real fight in Maryland's always the Democratic primary. But Larry Hogan, a Republican, won 2 terms as governor. So if this primary veers you to the left, pulls you to the left, do you have any concerns that Maryland does have a tendency from time to time to go red?
Well, Maryland's certainly shown that with Larry Hogan. And to be quite frank, I would be very surprised if Larry Hogan does not enter this race, regardless of what he said. You
really think Hogan's going to run?
Yeah, put that to the side. Hogan's going to be called to run by Mitch McConnell and the other Republicans. And January 20th, he'll make the decision and say, I'm in. I don't want to do it, but I've got to do it for my party. And he needs a purse.
Well, what gives you that belief?
He needs a perch for the bigger job. He wants that other job, and he can't get it right now when he's out of the game. He's got to stay in the game, and this is the way he can stay relevant and then move from there.
So you truly believe Democrats in Maryland need to prepare for a possible Hogan candidacy?
Oh, I think it's highly likely. And many others, by the way, for the very top of Maryland politics. We share that
because
belief.
We saw last year in the midterms, sometimes a Trump-aligned candidate gets it nominated in Maryland, and it's a little bit easier for the Democrats. But Hogan would be a tough run for you?
Hogan would be a tough run for anybody. But I think we can hold the middle because folks know that we're about getting things accomplished, and Democrats would see the importance of the race. We can't let a blue seat, go red. That just can't happen.
But you just identified as progressive. That'd be fine with you in a general election against Hogan?
I'm progressive, but at the same time, that getting stuff done, that's the difference. People want to see that business chamber of commerce, that Rotarian mentality that you're there to reach over the line and bring folks together. And we've done that all through the House in the last 5 years, and we're going to continue to do that in the Senate.
And we'll continue to watch this race. Maryland Senate race with Jamie Raskin, the congressman, decided not to run, seemed a little sleepy. People say, oh, it's just going to be a quiet race, but you never know. You're right. Former Governor Hogan could run, could be quite a matchup against the Democratic nominee. Might be you. We'll stay tuned. Congressman David Trone, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in New Hampshire today. Will he run as a third-party presidential contender or not? We'll discuss that with our political panel next.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman. Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose your job?
I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
The great silent majority is rising like never before, and under our leadership, the forgotten man and woman will be forgotten no longer. With your help, your love, your vote, we will put America first.
Welcome back to America Decides. Donald Trump, the former president, had the crowd behind him at this weekend's conservative Turning Point conference in Florida, where several of his opponents were booed on the stage. While a majority of the Republican field has avoided so far going toe-to-toe with the former president, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has made it clear that he believes running around the front runner is not a winning strategy.
What is your path to victory?
Through Donald Trump. There's no other way to do it, George. There's not a separate lane or, we've heard these conversations before in presidential races. In this Republican primary, there is one lane to the nomination, and that lane is right through Donald Trump. He's at the head of it.
Leslie Sanchez and Chuck Rocha join us now. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist who served in the George W. Bush administration. Chuck is a Democratic strategist and the president of Solidarity Strategies. He previously served as a senior advisor for Senator Bernie Sanders in his 2020 White House campaign. Chuck, let's begin with you. When you look at the Democratic race right now with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. kind of creating a little noise against President Biden, what do you see?
Well, I think it's what it is. It's a little bit of noise. Like, Biden is clearly going to be the nominee. He's put together the operation. He's got a real campaign running. And I think what really bothers me as a Democrat is you've got folks out there on the far left of Bernie Sanders, left of the party, that at a race that's going to be so close, you don't need to lose any of your support from the left, the center, or the right of our party.
Do you think there's any chance that Senator Joe Manchin runs for the Democratic nomination?
I think in money, in politics, no labels, all the chatter that you hear out there, I think anything's possible. When you go and talk to voters about Joe Biden or you talk to them about Donald Trump, who I think probably will be the Republican nominee, I think there's an appetite out there for something different. And I think that No Labels sees that. And I think Joe Manchin kind of sees it as a way to raise his profile as well.
Leslie, speaking of an appetite for something different, is there an appetite for something different inside the Republican Party at this point? Governor DeSantis clearly struggling. What's his path ahead, and where is that Trump alternative, if anywhere?
Sure. Robert, you raised a really important question. I will tell you, my sources say that a lot of folks are looking at putting their dollars in entities like No Labels. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a big swing, Republican voters moving in that direction. But the quiet conversations in this invisible primary that revolve around money, people are looking for alternatives. There was a big interest in Governor DeSantis, earlier this year. I think with kind of the mishaps of the campaign, people are reevaluating. But this is, again, what happens at this point in the primary. Why you have the Iowa straw poll, why you have retail politics, is for people to get to know these candidates better. So anything is possible right now. But in terms of a way forward, there is a growing appetite for an alternative to the former president.
Could it be Chris Christie, Leslie?
No. I don't see a way forward. It reminds me so much of like former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. It was somebody who's really good on the stump, had a lot of great things. People like the argumentative style. But where was the grassroots base? And I think Chuck could agree with that. Where are you going to get that support in those early primaries? And the numbers just don't add up when you look at who has operations on the ground.
Chuck, you've worked with Senator Bernie Sanders at a high level. Are his voters going to show up for President Biden come 2024?
I think they will. And I think what I'm seeing in focus groups, and I'm working in races around the country in Arizona and Nevada, and you see that they will because they don't want a Donald Trump. It's not that they're in love with Joe Biden, but Joe Biden has delivered enough for the progressive cause, mainly through Build Back Together, Build Back Better. And then you have Donald Trump there who just reminding good progressive Democrats that he appointed 3 conservative Supreme Court justices that just took away a woman's right to choose is a big deal for progressives, moderates, and conservatives in our party. And I think that there'll be a lot of that reminding going on as we lead into this election.
So tonight, No Labels, this group that's thinking about putting together a third party or independent ticket, is in Manchester, New Hampshire at St. Anselm College, and they're debuting some of their ideas. Senator Joe Manchin will be there. He's not making any endorsement of the group, it seems, or leaning into a run, but by being there, it says something. Let's listen to former Senator Doug Jones about this event.
It is a fool's errand to think that a third party can win in this country. There is no way on God's green earth that they can get to 270 electoral votes, which means they will be a spoiler.
The question is, who would Manchin be a spoiler for? Leslie, let's begin with you, then go to Chuck. If Senator Manchin decides to run on the No Labels ticket in 2024, would that take away votes from only President Biden, or could he maybe win over some of the moderate anti-Trump votes inside your own party?
Certainly anything like that is possible. I mean, we harken back to, of course, you think of Ross Perot in 1992. It wasn't under No Labels, but that was a significant shift of an alternative enough to disrupt not only the primary, but disrupt the general. And when, as Chuck alluded to, you have these too close to call elections, you can't really fracture a very delicate balance of your base in that way. So I think ultimately it affects the Democrats, but you would pick up some Republicans who just don't see the direction of the Republican Party going in a centrist kind of conciliatory work on both sides approach that a smaller percentage, I would say, Republicans support.
Chuck?
I think this hurts Joe Biden. As a Democrat, I think it does, and I think that they know that. And I think No Labels knows that. I think that's why you see most of their money coming from Republicans. You see most of the consultants around them as Republicans. They'll sprinkle in a few Democrats here and there, but they know what they're doing. They're hurting Joe Biden. They're hurting Democrats. They want to make sure a Republican is in the White House and that Joe Biden is not. And that's what I see out there every day when I'm hearing about No Labels and seeing that the people that they're hiring, look at their FEC reports, look at the money behind them. It's always follow the money.
If If President Biden decides not to run, Chuck, do you believe Senator Sanders would run for the nomination?
I think that's a big if. I mean, I think the only way he doesn't run if there's some kind of health scare or something, and I think there'll be a lot of people running, probably including Bernie Sanders.
And Leslie, when you look at the Democratic field, how are Republicans seeing President Biden's chances?
I think there's a lot of conversations that he is a weak president and there is an alternative. You hear so many people saying the bottom half of the ticket that does not look very strong in these early polling numbers would be a very good contest and contrast against the current president. So Republicans are feeling strong about the caliber of the candidates, the diversity, the strength of their ability to mount a national campaign. But all of the oxygen in the room, again, is taken by the former president, which is why I'm going to add this point at conversations I'm having in Texas with big bundlers. People that raise a lot of money are talking about no labels. And that was the last thing I expected to hear. But people are trying to move the pieces on the board strategically to find a way to move forward.
Well, we're going to be keeping a close eye on all of this, Chuck. I mean, Senator Manchin is in New Hampshire, says something. And Leslie, all your points appreciated. Chuck, really appreciate you stopping by. This is going to be quite a race. You never really know what's going to go on in American politics. My motto is always assume nothing. And that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?